Hello and welcome to the Reconnect podcast, a weekly show sponsored by the Anasazi Foundation and powered by Sturry Studios. I'm Gaynalyn Condi, your host. I'm so grateful you've joined us, where we have conversations to help you strengthen your most important relationships and reconnect with those that matter most. Hello and welcome to the Reconnect podcast. We are so excited to have you join us here at the Sturry Studios. We are sponsored by the Anasazi Foundation, and I am Gaynalyn Condi, your host. Thrilled to be with my friend Jonathan today. Jonathan Boldt is coming to us from, where do you live?
Provo.
Okay, so we should have carpooled.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with the Wasatch Front, I'm in Lehigh and Jonathan's in Provo. And we met 2 years ago, maybe?
Yeah,
Ish.
I think so.
I was speaking at an event in Ogden, is that right?
Yeah, it was date night.
Date night, yeah. I was doing a speaking event and shared a little bit of my story with infertility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you and your wife were coming to this event. Had you decided you were done trying? Or were you feeling...
No, we were at the point where it was getting really expensive.
Yes.
And didn't know quite what else to do.
So with regards to infertility, I think this is our first infertility episode. So I'm excited about it because it is a shared story for you and I. And I really wanted to have Jonathan on because he brings a different perspective to maybe a conversation that you've heard a million times about this issue. If you're presently going through an infertility journey, depending where you're at in the process, it's discouraging and it's emotional. But before we jump into all of that, tell us a little bit about what you do in your everyday life and your family.
Yeah, I'm a journalist and writer, editor with manageglenbeck.com.
Yeah.
And work with Blaze Media. So.
Yeah, so Glenn Beck and Blaze, recognizable for our listeners. And you and your wife have been married how long?
March will be 15 years.
So not 2 days, not 2 weeks
days.
or 2 years, which I think is a significant part of the story, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been trying for 14 years, so we started trying right away. So it's been a long time. We've gone through the phase of being poor college students and didn't have many options to having good insurance and lots of options and still nothing working. So
yeah, and what does your wife do during the day?
She works for the church, the LDS church.
Okay.
She's an event planner for the different schools.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, so we're actually going to Hawaii for an event in BYU in Hawaii in a few weeks. So,
nice.
Yeah.
That's a good gig to
she
get.
She can't go without me. Make sure that's the one thing I do. So.
So you met in college?
Actually, before my family moved into her family's neighborhood.
Okay.
My senior year of high school.
Okay.
And so we met at church.
At church, okay. Yeah. And when you got married, did you guys already have a conversation previous? I think I have a son in college right now, and it's interesting what he's discussing in the dating world, what he's looking for in a potential partner. Did you talk about families? Do you come from big families?
I do. I'm the oldest of 7.
Okay.
And my wife's the oldest of 2. So
okay.
Little different experience.
A little different.
I came from the perspective of like maybe 1 or 2 kids, with having kids around all the time.
Yeah, you're like, I like my alone time.
Yeah, and her parents, when they got married, her dad was 51 when she was born. It was a first marriage for both. And so all of her cousins were like 20, 30 years older. And so she wanted the big family with the cousins and everything. And so that's what she wanted going into it.
So she married into that, and you married into what you probably wanted.
Yeah.
So you got married, and kids were right in the forefront of your plan. And a little bit about my backstory, same. I've been married 28 years, and when we got engaged, we sat down and literally, we crack up now, mapped it out. We were like, okay, we're going to go to college here, we're going to live here, then we're going to have kids at this point, and then we're going to do nothing.
None of it happened, right?
Nothing. Jonathan, literally nothing has happened the way we thought. We didn't go to the college we thought. We didn't live where we thought. Nothing has happened the way we thought. And you beat us It took 7 years to have our son, and then another 6 years. So I guess combined, we're about the same.
Yeah.
Another 6 years to have our daughter, and we are a family of 2, which within, I think, not just our religious affiliation, but other religions, that's on the smaller scale, right?
Yeah.
2
Yeah.
kids, I get asked a lot, where are our other children?
Yeah.
And I usually say, I hide them in the closet with Harry Potter. We pull them out for family pictures, and then we put them back. No, because people do, in all seriousness, people do say the weirdest, rudest, insensitive comments. So take us through those beginning, you get married, you decide you're going to have kids, and how soon into that trying did you realize something wasn't working?
Well, so my wife, before we got married, was on birth control for bone density things. So it was like not preventing that. But so when we got married, we thought, it might take a little bit to come off of that and for it to work.
Right.
And so
you were being patient.
Yeah. And so after, 6 months, it's like, maybe something's going on. And then after a year, that's when we first started seeing specialists.
Okay.
And
what did they say right away?
it was idiopathic. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. So,
which is, I think, no matter what, whether it's chronic illness, infertility, if you don't know a why, that's the stress.
oh yeah.
The stress is like, especially for what we're going to really talk about today is the male perspective on infertility. I think especially for men, because my husband's always like, after 28 years, he realizes like, I don't want him to fix it. I just want him to validate me. Jonathan understands.
I'll second that.
and he's learned like, oh wait, did I try to fix that? I'm like, yes, I just needed you to validate. So here you're going through this process and the doctors say, we don't really know why. So then as a man, you can't go out and kill that animal and bring it back to the cave.
Right.
So what did you do when you were not getting any answers? What were you guys in those initial years feeling about the whole thing?
It got really emotional really fast and was really hard to deal with. And I think after we realized that, we don't have the money to do IVF or we don't have other resources, it was just, we can't figure out what's wrong. So let's just keep trying it as normal, but not worry about it. And so it got to the point where we almost didn't even talk about it.
Yeah, it becomes the elephant in the room, right?
And we thought, we'll take a year off and then we'll come back to it and see how things are going. And that year off turned into like 4 or 5 years. And then all of a sudden we're like past 30 and then we're getting older and now we're at 35.
Every one of your friends have had babies.
Yep.
Multiple times over now.
Yep. Even the ones that didn't get married until 10 years after
us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember feeling personally like if I go to one more baby shower, right?
Yeah.
And yet then you don't want your friends to not tell you they're having a baby because that's hard too. You don't want to be the last to know because you're the infertile couple.
Yeah.
That dynamic is interesting. And then what were your feelings as a husband at this time? It wasn't talked about for a period of time. Did you both go through those feelings of like, is it my fault? Did I do something?
I think we're actually pretty blessed to not have that as an issue. And not just because it was idiopathic, but neither of us blamed each other. We just, it brought us closer, really, so we kind of moved past that pretty easily and didn't blame anybody. So it was more of a feeling of confusion as like, because growing up LDS, it's almost a feeling of if you're a good person, you're worthy, you're going to have a good family and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a faith perspective, I remember hearing many comments of like, so you guys just don't have enough faith?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes, we do. Or are you just not focusing on it? Mm-hmm. Do you know what the prophet says we're supposed to be doing about, And then I don't know how you got through it, but I think humor really helps some of those awkward, hard things.
Oh, yeah.
And so I started to say rude stuff back. Like, people would say, so you're just not into kids? Yeah. And I'm an elementary school teacher, by the way, so that's alarming.
Yeah, we don't like
kids.
Yes,
we're not into kids, but that's actually what I do professionally. Or one joke we started is because we rescued a Yorkie, and the Yorkie had been abused. And so at the time, it was fun to tell people, well, we're really into rare dogs. We don't want kids, because kids and dogs, rare dogs don't always mix. Yeah. People like, really? No, not really. Yeah. Or my favorite is, well, kids cost a lot of money, you know, and we're into money. And so this is
We
our
prefer to
savings
travel,
plan. Yeah. And I would do that because what do you say when people ask about this thing that is your greatest desire, the thing of your heart that you want more than anything, and you can't seem to find a solution to it, and people mistakenly think they're helping.
Yeah.
But then you don't want people to talk about it. How did you guys navigate that? What did you do to kind of deal with that?
A lot of the resources we found or people we talked to, it was all just kind of depressing.
Yes.
And so as a writer...
Like what? Give an example.
Oh, just... I mean, just reading the medical books about like how impossible the odds are. And we even had a doctor tell us it's a miracle anyone ever gets pregnant with how hard it is. But then you see
the kids in high school doing crack, getting pregnant on prom night. I'm like, if I read about one more unwanted pregnancy, the crackheads are getting pregnant just like that. You know, prom night, no problem. Irresponsible adults that pay tithing and pay taxes, no. They have a home, they can provide for a child. They're not getting pregnant. Yeah.
And so kind of I wasn't a writer at the time, but I always enjoyed writing.
Yeah.
And so a friend of mine who's a physician's assistant had fertility problems too. And we got together one time and just recorded, it was almost 6 hours conversation. Like we just were at a restaurant and just sat there all night. And then turned it into a book. And so
Tell the title of the book.
We wanted to come at it as a humorous side, and so it's called Shooting Blanks.
Shooting Blanks, which if you go through infertility, you know exactly what that is. And it's the guy...
Or watch Seinfeld.
Seinfeld, yes. But what is unique about the book is that it's from the guy's perspective.
Yeah, and a lot of it, at least my favorite parts, are writing the conversations I had in my head.
Okay.
And so somebody comes up and says something dumb to you, like, we're married 5 years, and they say, well, have you thought about having kids? It's like, no, not ever, you know. And so we
think about Seinfeld episodes. We don't think about having children.
Yes. And so I just wrote out a few chapters of, you know, dumb stuff people would say, and then my response to them. And
you know, a cancer diagnosis, infertility, depression, anxiety, unemployment, right? This is kind of one of the tools I say, put in your toolbox is some humor.
Because you have to.
You have to laugh.
Yeah.
So can people find that on Amazon?
Yeah.
Okay. So Shooting Blanks, if you want. And what a great idea to give to your husband or your partner that validates their perspective. Because I bet a lot of people, women in general, I'm overgeneralizing, tend to, at the Reconnect podcast, it's all about connection, right? So they're connecting with their friends, their moms, their sisters, they're processing all these feelings. And guys, generally speaking, I know not always, tend to like, what? We talked about it 2 years ago. Why are we bringing it up again?
And add an extra element to that when it's south of the border.
Yes, it's
your equipment's not working.
It's your business, yeah.
And so guys really don't like talking about it.
They don't, because it questions everything about them.
Yeah, so that's been my favorite part is when a husband will read the book or the wife gives it to him, tells him to read it. And then they feel like, oh, we're not the only ones going through this.
And that's really what like connection and reconnection is about, is like, so you go through a time where you feel like you isolate, but it really just takes one person. That's why I write books too, because you can give a book to someone and then they can decide when they want to have the conversation. Yeah. And really reading is a conversation. And so all of a sudden the people in my books, all of a sudden I hear from readers that say, oh my gosh, those are like my best friends now, because they validated exactly where I'm at. So what was the hardest time for you guys? What if you were to take the last right now is?
Yeah, because we had 2 failed IVF attempts this year, and that kind of maxed out our insurance benefits. And so
did insurance has changed over the last few years?
Yeah, it did. My wife's insurance is through the church, and they didn't cover any fertility stuff for a long time. But now they have like a maximum of like $10,000 you can use.
But you've used it up.
Yeah, we use that up. It goes pretty quick with fertility
it's expensive.
Stuff. So we actually have an appointment tomorrow.
Okay, listen. Prayers from the Reconnect podcast listeners, right? Because I think what in all seriousness, prayer to me is one of the other powerful tools in addition to humor. But prayer, for me, I get prayer fatigue for my own list of prayers. So I love praying for the Boldts because I'm tired of praying about my same old Like, me
we'll
and
take
God,
them.
I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, I know, it's me again. Same thing. Can we just repeat yesterday's prayer? And I'm sure you feel that way. Like, how do
Yeah.
you pray about something in a new way so that the prayers stay alive? What have you done on a spiritual? Because here we're non-denominational, but people know the lens that I kind of come from and we have listeners that don't even believe in a higher power or God. But I love to ask, what have you done spiritually? Not just with the humor, but with not being mad at God, or have you been mad at God? Because He's okay with that.
You know what? Neither of us have been.
Really?
Which is weird. A lot of people we talk to go through that.
Yeah.
And
And I always say, listen, He's fine with that. He's big enough to handle you being mad at Him, right?
I mean, we've been frustrated thinking, this is what the plan should be, and it's a righteous plan. Why are we not able to do it? But I think spiritually, you do the things like praying and fasting, and which feels like can get pretty repetitive.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing is just us working on our own relationship with God. And as we did that, like, there's just a peace about it.
Isn't that true? The burden doesn't go away, it gets lighter.
Yeah.
What else have you tried to do that's worked and not worked in validating your wife?
In validating her. Wow. So the first interview I did after I wrote the book, I think it was almost 6 years ago now.
Yeah.
The very first question was, how does it feel to not be able to give your wife the one thing she wants most in the world?
We talked about this in pre-prep for the podcast today, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Another way to say that is, how does it feel to feel like the thing that you and your wife want together is not working out?
Right.
Not, dude, you're blaming.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is what you mentioned, is validating, not trying to fix it.
Yeah, which is
because this is one thing there's no matter what you do that you can't fix it.
So what do you do when she's crying or sad and maybe you're not in that headspace? That's what I've noticed in my marriage, is like, sometimes if we're grieving or we're stressed or whatever, we're approaching it very differently, and we're not timing it usually the greatest ways, which is sometimes good. Like, when we're worried about our kids, I love it when he's really stressed out about one of our kids and I'm in a good place.
Right.
If we're both stressed out, it's not necessarily helpful. But what have you done?
So there's a couple years, it's been 5 years ago now probably, where I was really anxious to get started, just thinking, we're getting older, we really want to have kids, so what are we waiting for?
Yeah.
And she just wasn't ready for it.
Yeah.
And I learned really quickly.
Getting started on treatments?
Yeah, and paying for things and all that.
Investing.
And so just knowing that she wasn't ready for it, I didn't push real hard. And then that way when she was ready, it was like, okay, I'm already ready to go, and I can help support you in however you need it. One thing I don't know it's important with everybody, but for us was for me to go with her to all the appointments. Whether it was even just getting her blood drawn.
So it wasn't her alone.
Yeah. And I think just that being together through everything was
brought
important.
You closer.
Even if we weren't actively fixing something or doing something, we're just being together and going through it together.
So basically, Jonathan, you're telling me you're a perfect husband.
No.
Because those
you can call my wife; she'll tell you. I'm not.
Well, and I have loved having this opportunity, because I think one of the things that I remember from our process, and I think we've talked about this in some of our pre-conversations, is that for a woman, it's very much this, like, my husband has gone through unemployment, and there's this, and I'm not offending, I'm a working woman, so I'm not saying only men are supposed to be working.
Right.
But there's something like innately wired inside of a man's soul to care for his family. And I think on the same side, not to take away from a male's perspective on infertility, there's something innately wired in women that is about carrying a child. And I think it's to protect the fact that it is a process to have a baby, and the pain and the sacrifice that we go through. I think nature-wise or God-wise, we have to want it at this, like, guttural level.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we look to the wife in the infertility story, and the man has a guttural part of him too.
Yeah.
Especially if they're shooting blanks. Let's just be honest about it, right?
Yeah. Which, it's kind of funny. So when I wrote the book,
you didn't know?
That was not the issue.
Oh, is it an issue now too?
When we came back to it years later, it was, which we fixed it because I had been on testosterone replacement, so that kind of kills off production of things.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of funny, like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. Like,
Isn't that interesting?
Like
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Do you feel like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for us, we almost got to a place of surrender right before we finally got pregnant, and it stuck, you know? Have you had pregnancies that didn't?
Not even a miscarriage,
Okay.
not even a positive test ever,
Yeah,
so.
and we think we had a miscarriage, but really our first official positive test was my son. And I remember rejoicing just for a positive test. Like, I didn't believe the plus sign.
Yeah.
I was like, what? And not to gross everyone out, I've kept both my positive pregnancy tests in little Ziploc bags in the children's little baby books.
That's awesome.
And it's because of that. If you have not even seen a plus or a double line or whatever your reader is, that was a miracle just to be pregnant. But what did you feel like? What I started to ask is, I look back now and I know our marriage needed those experiences. And we became a different married couple because of infertility. And for some, it tears you apart. What have you done besides attending appointments with her, giving her space, being sensitive about trying and working on plans? What other things have you noticed have come out of good of your marriage because you've had to fight for 14 years for something you both want?
I mean, I feel like not just fertility, we've had a lot of issues that have come up. But I feel
it brings up everything. You're like, oh, well, we'll open that closet and dig up all that junk and communication.
I think it's helped, though, like bring us so close together that, like I had two brothers that died of leukemia a year apart. And then a couple of years later, her dad died. And so, I mean, we've gone through grief, financial troubles, anything you can imagine we've been through. And I think that initial struggle of fighting for something together helped a lot.
So I feel like I'm about to cry, like it's right there, because I feel the spirit of what you're saying. And I feel that so much in our lives when we're first starting out married or in a career or anything that we're attempting to do, all the cool stuff is the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't want to sound like an old lady, but the younger generation, right, that when it hits a resistance and it's not working out, there tends to be, I think, a social philosophy right now of bailing.
Yeah. And finding your own path in a different way, kind of thing. Where it's like, no, you can have a good path. You just got to work hard for it.
Yeah, and then you miss this sweet spot of intimacy and connection. At the Reconnect podcast, right? Like, what can you create in connection when you have weathered grief and death and infertility and financial? Like, your foundation, your root system is intertwined with each other. You've built trust and understanding that doesn't come unless you go through a storm together, right? And I'm not being Pollyanna about it. I'm just saying that if someone's listening to this and you're in the middle of your, I call them wilderness experiences, right?
Yeah.
And they're not fun. They're usually like, leave your comfort zone, go into the wilderness, and by the way, you may be there a long time, and you're going to run out of food.
But they're the ones that you look back on with the fondest memories.
Yeah.
Like the easy stuff we just breeze through, we don't even remember.
Yeah.
But the stuff you work hard for is what really brings joy.
When you see a 90-year-old couple and they're holding hands, you know that comes from a place of like, we trust each other. We fought together. We disappointed and forgave each other over and over again. So where are you at now? If you were to give counsel to a younger couple that is just starting out, they're only a year or two into it, and everyone around them is getting pregnant like, and it's starting to wear on their marriage. What counsel would you give them, Jonathan?
I feel like, like I mentioned before, our next appointment's tomorrow. But
we're praying big time for you, brother.
And
what's this appointment? Not to get in your business too much, but...
Oh, no, it's fine. So after the last IVF, they thought it could be endometriosis that was causing the problem. Yeah. So my wife's been on medication since then to kind of clear up the scar tissue.
Which we haven't even talked about. Shots for IVF? That can break up a marriage right there.
Yeah. actually,
She's done good?
shockingly, that's actually brought more closeness because I give her all the shots.
Okay, but does her hormone changing?
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, come on.
We don't need to talk about it. But
Yeah.
yes, that goes up and down.
I'm not talking about the actual
no,
shots. I'm saying
okay.
hormonal cycling.
Well, but
is
even
intense.
just giving her the shot,
Is
like she would,
that's
you know,
hard.
kind of, she doesn't do well with needles very
Yeah.
well. So afterwards, it shocked me that she thanked me.
I love that.
And was like crying and thanking me because she didn't think she could give herself the shot. And so just even that. But yeah, the hormonal stuff. And then this medication it basically brought her down to menopause levels.
Yeah.
And so it's hot flashes, headaches.
Yeah, that's where I'm at after all my chemo. So I validate her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this next appointment is to see where to go from here.
With the endometriosis.
Yeah. Well, in that and financially we're kind of maxed out on some things. And so thankfully they're probably going to work with us a little bit. And so there's still a glimmer of hope.
Okay.
But I feel like the best advice is just to know whether it ever works out or not, you can have a fulfilling, joyful marriage.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have lots of nieces and nephews, and
connections.
we're the favorite aunt and uncle.
For real.
Yeah. And so, I mean, just to know that. So yesterday in church, they did this whole new curriculum for the youth and stuff. And we're scout leaders. And so we got to go and we're watching this. And I had the distinct impression in my mind that whether we ever have kids or not, we're there for all the kids. And that's what we got to be. And I know my wife, and I know that she would be amazing at that. She already is amazing at that. To be totally honest, weren't too thrilled about going into scouting. Neither of us were into that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But as soon as we started meeting with the kids, fell in love with it.
And I think that's so important to realize that you have seen the value of connection with nieces and nephews, volunteering in a church, volunteering in your community. That's a beautiful layer of an infertility story that I think is worth us emphasizing. That yes, there is a heartache that may be there, but what are we doing to connect outside of our heartache so we can keep moving through the heartache, right? And not get stuck. I'm a fan of saying, this is real pain and I'm really feeling it. And I'm going to keep moving because I don't want to camp out here forever, right? And so thank you for sharing. We will definitely continue to keep you and your wife in our prayers.
Oh, thank you.
And so I think you didn't quite, what would be your advice to someone besides keep going? What would you say to a couple that is just maybe in the beginnings or in the middle? Yeah,
because I think no matter what the obstacle in life is, you can either come closer together or split farther apart.
So protect that.
Protect it. And don't try to fix it, like you've been saying.
Yeah.
Sometimes all it takes is if she's going through some hormonal things, just to go and sit there and hold her, you know, until she moves through it, and then take a deep breath and move on.
Yeah.
If I'm having a hard time with something, she's just been there to sit with me, you know, and you don't have to fix it. Just enjoy being together.
Yeah.
Because even the hard stuff it does bring joy.
It does.
It always eventually, or in the moment, it's just, you got to be patient and just love each other and realize that one thing that we thought of that, I don't know if it's a little irreverent or something.
Yay, we like irreverent. We like crying, praying, and being irreverent.
Yeah. Even if we do have like 10 kids, eventually they're all going to move on.
Yeah.
And then it's just us. Yeah. And so we got to love each other.
Yeah.
You know, for that point too.
Yeah, we're approaching a new phase. My daughter turned 16. My son's in college and out of the house, and we've had unemployment, which has allowed him to be home. And my daughter will be gone at certain times for the summer for camps, and my son was gone for 2 years serving in Africa, and we got to practice run it. Like, how are we doing with the empty nesting? And it's true. It's like, oh, we still like each other. We enjoy being together. Yeah. We still, and it's not always that way. You sometimes grow apart because life is busy and you're always doing a part. Thank you for your vulnerability. That's where connection happens, and your honesty, and thank you for your humor. I remember one of the funny, rude comments I got was, well, you can just adopt. And I remember saying, there's not a baby, the baby department at Walmart or Target doesn't actually have babies.
Yeah.
It's not like slide your debit card and bam, you've got a family.
Yeah.
But
it's a lot more expensive than people think too.
And it's complicated, and it's a different process. So my prayers for you and your wife that your family right now is complete and beautiful,
mm-hmm.
but if God feels that children are supposed to be a part of this too, I pray that will happen, and you'll continue to grow in love for each other and connection for each other. I think I shared this with you one day, that looking back on the other side, we had those 7 years and then another 6.
Mm-hmm.
And as I watch my children right now and I see their life decisions and the patterns of their life, I see exactly how that was orchestrated.
Yeah.
That when we wanted them to come, they needed to wait, because we needed to become something. They needed to be on earth at a very specific time
mm-hmm.
and meet very specific people.
Yeah.
And you don't know that. And I remember those stories on days where there's something else that I'm wishing would happen like this,
mm-hmm.
or now, or I'm tired of praying because it's been 30 years. And trusting God's timing for me is always perfect, even if it's not looking the way I thought.
Well, I know that's so true for just even my wife and I, that I was the oldest of 7. My mom and dad were like 23 and 21.
Yeah.
And she was the oldest, but her dad was 51. Her mom was, I think, 38. And so had they gotten married earlier and had kids earlier, she'd been 20 years older than me.
Yes, and you wouldn't have
so we
ever
wouldn't have
met.
Yeah. And
Isn't that great?
I was born early enough and she was born late enough that we crossed paths at the right time.
Found each other. I love that.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan Boldt, Shooting blanks.
Yeah.
I knew I was saying it wrong the minute I started saying it, and they can find that on Amazon.
Yeah.
What a great gift to give someone. I believe we can't give a casserole and fix problems. So I believe in the power of actual books with pages, because
mm-hmm.
they can sit by someone's bed until they're ready to read it.
And it's not very big.
And it's not very big.
You can read it.
Because the guys in your life may not want to read a whole bunch of whatever. So thank you. Thank you for being here and for your heart and your goodness. And check out Glenn Beck and the Blaze. You might find Jonathan has some great content that he puts up. So
thank you.
And thank you again for joining us here at the Reconnect podcast. I hope that, especially on this episode, that you will share it with someone that is going through this process. Infertility, we've laughed a little bit, but it's serious, and it's heart-wrenching, and it's exhausting, and it's financially taxing. And from a personal standpoint, I remember those that came that really helped it become a little bit easier, and then many that, bless their hearts, didn't help. And so I hope that this conversation is another way you can support someone that's going through something that you can't fix. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll come back again at the Reconnect podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Reconnect podcast, presented by Anasazi Foundation. Are you worried about your teenager? Are they struggling with depression, low self-esteem, anger, drugs, or suicidal thoughts and feelings? If so, Anasazi Foundation can help. Anasazi is a wilderness therapy program for at-risk youth, and our mission is to help turn hearts homeward. To learn more about us, please visit anasazi.org. If you liked this show, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Thank you again.